Okay, today's May 8th. This is the Carpenter Core Working Group session. So, going to be going through some of the different PRs or just also discussion of whatever anyone might want to go over. Looks like there's a couple project updates. Emmanuel, I know that you've added these first two. There's some uh, integration testing RFC, and then also an update on the taint syncing for node registration. Do you want to go ahead and review those?
Yeah, so in terms of the testing story, I think we've talked about this several times already. There was an RFC that we recently merged around how we want to handle just general the integration story around the Carpenter project generally, whether that's within the core project as well as different cloud providers. So within this, we effectively detailed and outlined what the goals were we would want to do. Mainly, it would be to just migrate I guess, the most robust set of tests that we have within the community, which is the AWS providers, into this repo in the case where the tests were cloud agnostic. And then also letting that be one of the driving mechanisms to allow cloud providers to validate that their implementation of Carpenter is conformant with what the upstream project is expecting and holds to be, I guess, holds certain variants to be true. We've merged this RFC and we've actually started the work to migrate tests. So we've actually merged in several different tests over the past few days, along with a README page that outlines how to wire this up within within the tests, within the specific cloud provider test, as well as to just develop with using Quark inside of this core project. So yeah, that's the main update. I know there's been a few people looking at this. This is effectively very useful for any open source cloud providers as well as internal cloud providers. Really anybody that's working with Carpenter. So yeah, that's just the project updates. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a message in Carpenter Dev or reach out to me directly.
Right on. Yeah, I imagine this helps, especially for anyone that's interested in working on their own cloud providers, right? So,
Yeah, this is a good place to start.
Yeah, just wanted to say, like, from the point of view of Azure Cloud Provider, this is great, right? Because we had to replicate some of the tests, and the tests from AWS provider were a great starting point. We did need to adjust them in a couple of places, so it would be great to take a look at, how we're generalizing those. For example, in picking, different instance types, etc. I'm sure it's possible, but some of the changes that we had to introduce might be a good guidance there. I didn't have a bandwidth to actually take a look at that, but still wanted to say that this is a great development and you're looking forward into, moving it to a common place.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. If you can just go to look at one of the open PRs, it actually has an outline of how we actually go about this. So one of the interesting things the first PR, um, not yeah, that one, where we're actually just allowing cloud providers to define a default node pool and whatever their node class is, and we'll just apply it as part of the test. That way, you can define whatever you want inside of your requirements. We have a set inside of this core project for the Quark provider, but you can effectively define whatever you want, and you're off.
Yeah.
So
So I saw that and we actually kind of prototype using it and it works great. The catch is that the existing tests in some cases have to constrain the instance types. For example, if they want to use, a certain number of CPUs, etc. And, existing tests in the AWS provider were doing it by adding selectors for, say, large or extra large. I'm assuming that you're looking for ways of generalizing this. And, it's definitely possible, but, this is one of the examples where some of the adaptations were needed. There may be a couple of others, more subtle ones, but again, we could definitely iron out those by looking at what we had to change when we took the AWS provider test as a source and, adapted it for Azure. So,
Yeah, to be honest with you, that's actually one of for the remaining tests that are left for us to merge in, that's the blocker, is like trying to figure out the best way to figure out how to do these. Because a lot of those constructs we can move to using a more native Kubernetes solution, such as like pod anti-affinity and topology spread constraints. But others are just not as clear. So we're still looking into those. But like the goal with this core project, I will say, is that is one of the core tenets is it needs to be cloud agnostic. However, whatever, that's whatever we're testing. So yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
kudos on this work as well. Like, I know this is like, I'm super excited to see this stuff come into the core. And I can absolutely assure you that as more tests are added here, like we're going to be running these inside of like our Red Hat CI systems and whatnot too. So this is like, I think this is like just really cool to see. So thank you, Emmanuel, and everyone else.
Yeah, that's great. But love to hear that. Uh, cool. But yeah, that's all I have.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. There's also the taint syncing issue that I know that you had been working on. Did you want to just give a brief overview of where that is and any updates there?
Yeah, I think since Jeremy, since you're here, since you actually did the implementation and the work, do you want
Oh,
to?
yeah, great. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was in the kitchen. The taints, yeah, it's merged in now for startup taints. So in the main upstream Karpenter, it will now not sync your taints if you have a specific label on the node when the node comes up. And then we also have the follow-up PR on the AWS cloud provider. So it no longer syncs taints unless using custom AMIs.
Yeah, can you quickly pull up that CR or yeah, this is I don't know if we have the actual specific label there. Ah, there it is. Yeah, this is generally, I think this is probably generally good, and we'll need to call this out, I mean, more loudly, I think, inside of our release notes. But I would, for any cloud provider that's implementing, well, any cloud provider that is implementing an AMI that they're aware of and can provide labels and annotations and such to kubelet, I think this is something to keep in mind. This is, I guess, our attempt at doing the correct, so solving the problem around for startup taints. So if you have the opportunity, please do try to take this in um, into your own variation.
Cool. Yeah, any questions with this? Don't think so. Okay. There's one other change. So working on one quick follow-up for it. But when looking at consolidation, there's a recent change where emptiness is going to be prioritized over drift when it comes to graceful consolidation and the ordering. There's quite a long write-up that I have here about it, but basically there was some custom handling within Drift for empty nodes that we were doing previously. And so Drift being first, what we would see is we would have our drifted nodes and empty nodes. And for any of the nodes that intersected, because there was no simulation required, we would actually send off those empty nodes. And so what could happen is you could end up in this case where even if your budgets for drifted nodes were um, extremely permissive and your empty nodes were not, or vice versa, you could end up in a case where you may expect that you would attempt to drift up to 100 nodes and instead you're drifting one at a time for emptiness or more empty nodes than not. And so while reconciles are fast and this shouldn't be a problem, it's not super deterministic. And so taking out the handling of empty nodes from drift enables emptiness to be able to handle all of this on its own. And then emptiness running first also addresses a bit of, I think, what we were getting at with the original handling of drift and empty is if something's drifted, we want to bring all of our requirements up to date as quickly as possible. And if there's patching, like a new AMI release, I can understand the intent for security there. However, it was less clear to me what it meant to have a node that was both empty and drifted. And so just reducing the node, I mean, there's no requirements to replace. So empty is kind of special in that you really are only deleting this node. And so the change is now that these empty nodes are considered first before we do before we do drift checking. And then there's another change I'm working on right now that I have a PR open for where emptiness, when we're evaluating all of these nodes, you could have 1,000 nodes that are empty that we're going to be processing and deleting. And then if in validation there was pod churn on a single node, the entire batch of empty nodes is tossed out. And so you can end up in this case where anytime there's churn, we're actually not deleting empty nodes. And the change is going to be such that we are in validation only removing nodes that had pods scheduled to them, and we will still process empty nodes. So that's my change on consolidation coming through. Yeah, any questions? Otherwise, we can move on. Great. So we have the RFC for node overlay. I know we've had it for a while and we've been talking about it. Not sure, Emmanuel, if you want to give an update or if there's people in the meeting that will have additional comments that they want to make.
Yeah, I mean, main thing I wanted to say here is this is probably one of our more anticipated features that we have that we've had an RFC open for a while. This is like an updated version of the original RFC that we opened about like 6 months ago. So please, yeah, feel free to take a look at it. This I would say that this RFC is a little bit more concrete in terms of what we're actually planning on implementing for the first round, effectively for I guess the alpha feature that we're planning on releasing, or the alpha, I guess, CRD. Please take a look, see if there are use cases that, well, if some of these use cases that we have outlined here matches some of the things that you're looking for, or maybe even your customers are looking for, your users are looking for. So yeah, please feel free to take a look and provide any additional feedback. I, unless there is any feedback right now or questions, I mean, we can kind of move on, but I will try to have all the questions and comments answered here inside of the doc by the next working group meeting that we have, so that it can be, a little bit more of a flushed out conversation then as well. But right now it's just mainly calling out that this is here and something that we can ask everyone to take a look at.
Real quick, any hotspots in particular you'd like comment on that you know of?
Yeah, I think a few things at least internally that we were going back and forth on was the merging strategy. We actually, at least internally, we decided that we just get more customer feedback on it. So, there's a recommended solution as to how we would merge many different these node overlays together. But yeah, if you have, any ideas, anything that you're specifically thinking about, please do feel free to share them. Unless anyone has anything specific, I'm like, I guess I'm letting this be a little bit more vague just so that everyone has the opportunity to read it themselves. Okay, cool.
we'll keep on moving. Unless there's questions or further discussion. Okay. Up next, we have a community question from Read2. I want to know if Karpenter deployment on COPS-based Kubernetes cluster is possible or not. Are they in the meeting?
May have been a drive-by because I saw their comment before and approved the question, but I had to go back and put their name in because I didn't see them.
Okay. Yeah, if it was a drive-by, then we can get back to it. Because I know Derek, you have. I'm sorry.
Give a brief answer, I guess, for the recording, which is on the latest version. There might be some hacks to get it to work, but I believe the answer is no, because COPS manages launch templates and Karpenter also manages with launch templates. And so trying to reconcile those two things, and this is specifically talking about COPS and AWS. I'm not sure if you can use COPS with other cloud providers, but I know that people were using COPS with Karpenter before we started managing the launch templates, but there were difficulties with it after.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. And Derek, I know you're working on this RFC, so you want to go ahead and do the review.
Yeah, there's no RFC for it yet. I want to grab some early input from folks. This is the RFCs for basically zonal resiliency for when a zonal outage there's AWS services that let you fail away a specific zone. Arc zonal shift is the one for AWS. And essentially the question that's been raised by some customers for the for AWS Karpenter version is, what should Karpenter actually be doing during a zonal outage? I have taken a initial stab at it that it shouldn't probably put revision in that zone. It probably shouldn't consolidate for drift or emptiness anywhere, given that if there is a zonal outage, you don't know if you might need that capacity or if you might not get it back. But I kind of wanted to ask, my main questions around do other cloud providers have something similar that they would like to be able to integrate with this? And two, do other people have strong opinions on how configurable or how little configuration there should be in terms of what does Karpenter do or not do during a zonal outage?
So from Azure perspective, it's absolutely a serious concern, right? So this is very useful to look at this. I don't have a very strong opinion of what Karpenter should or should not do, but yeah, it's pretty clear that recognizing that there is an outage and changing the behavior might be appropriate. I don't know about AWS, but we don't have a clear signal on the outage. So really, it might have to be something that Karpenter detects maybe a difference in behavior and starts responding to something, maybe some signal through cloud provider based on provisioning errors or something like that. And just wanted to add that another ask that we're getting frequently is, okay, the zone outage is over, right? The zone is coming back. Now I want to get my things rebalanced again. And that's another thing that, another problem that doesn't seem to be very well solved right now. So I don't know if it's in scope of this or not, but wanted to bring it up.
That is a great question. My opinion so far has been that this is an eventual consistency thing, that Karpenter probably shouldn't take proactive action to move your cluster back to a topologically spread state, and you would hope that would just happen over time. Because I would imagine I've seen zonal outages where the zone is back, quote unquote, and then everyone starts trying to way back in and things tip over. So I think you kind of would want to drip it out over time, but I don't know if that's kind of what you were thinking or if you wanted something more proactive.
I think ideally, if there was a clear signal, right, that the outage is over, some kind of active rebalancing, at least, I know some customers were interested in, and I agree it's probably not within, what Karpenter would do.
Yeah.
Conversely, I'd ask, like on zone outage, do you have what's your idea for detecting it, right? Like how to detect the onset or that you need to have a different behavior? What were you thinking?
Yeah. So AWS has a service, it's under Route 53. It's called the Application Recovery Controller, or ARC. And it allows customers to either exercise the CLI to like basically say there's a zonal outage. So you could have your own alarming and then trigger that kind of CLI on your own service. Or you can subscribe to like what are called auto shifts, which it will detect based off of, I think, like an existing alarm that you have and do it for you. So we were thinking about integrating with that, where we would basically say the deciding on the signal is outside of the core logic of Karpenter, because that really is like a cloud provider based offering, and that's the best way we would do it, and kind of shift that into the provider repos. And then if like for you guys, if you wanted to implement something that like looks at provisioning errors, or does its own health checking and then flips that switch, you guys could do that as well if that suits your use case.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I haven't read through the proposal, but I'm assuming you suggest communicating this somehow to the core, right? Like from the provider.
Yeah, adding a new interface probably to the cloud provider that's like get impaired zones or something like
Right.
that, or um, get is zone impaired or something like that. Who knows? And then having each cloud provider kind of exercise that on their own.
And I'm assuming that just filtering out those zones from, get instance types is not good enough, right? Because it doesn't stop those other mechanisms that you want to suspend.
Yeah, the provisioning is easy. Yeah, you could do it in the cloud provider already. It's the consolidation, which I think the Carpenter zonal shift should be smart enough to know that, like, okay, if a zone is out, I shouldn't consolidate in other zones, because it's likely that capacity is going to be shifting over. Like pods are going to move if they're zonally spread. And that, if you might need to scale up in those zones, you're probably not going to want to give up existing capacity that you already have, given that zonal outages should be a short occurrence.
Yeah, I would say
But
I
that'll
don't
be
know the degree to which existing capacity would or would not be affected, but pretty confident that in the impacted AZ, because the degree of impact can be hard to know, especially in the middle of an event, that disabling disruption of existing capacity in an AZ when it's affected is probably the direction Carpenter is going to want to go.
yeah.
Provisioning, obviously provisioning, don't provision because we have no way of knowing what's going to happen. Like, especially in a gray area failure for an AZ, like you might get 50% of your instances, but there's no way to know. So I guess that's my only comment is existing capacity even in the impaired zone would probably something we would want to keep.
And another thing that goes through my mind, and maybe that's too esoteric, but could Carpenter relax some of the, topology spread constraints that it observes, or that's too dangerous doing it like on behalf of the workloads?
I think the tricky part with topology spread constraints, right, is that it's not just Carpenter that needs to be aware of it at that point, it's Cube Scheduler.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So,
Especially if you got deployments that are strict on their scheduling, you wouldn't want to go edit those for the customer. Can't imagine.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about the deployments. I was thinking about how the internal Carpenter scheduling works.
yeah,
And yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be able to do anything that scheduler wouldn't, but it could decide to either spin up or not spin up an extra node in some cases. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably not worth it.
yeah. I mean, there are some interesting things you could do, like in Kubernetes. I want to say it was 127 it went GA, but the respect taints mode for topology spread constraint. You could taint all of the nodes in the affected AZ, and topology spread constraints would continue to work across the non-impacted AZs. I don't know if we want Carpenter to be in the business of tainting a bunch of nodes, but maybe we do. It's something worth considering.
That brings me to my configuration question. I think ideally we have this as a pretty strongly opinionated system that just does something for everybody, and we don't like have to surface a new API that lets people tweak with it and stuff like that. But that might be more of an implementation question we can discuss in the RFC.
Yeah, I guess to add to that is like I do think there is, I guess there's more of a question around the existing capacity, in the sense of like, I think we've mentioned this a few times of like what the different components such as kubelet will do, and in the impacted AZs and how we kind of need to navigate that and exactly how the node repair of Karpenter now is going to react in those scenarios as well. I think that's probably something we'll need. That is a question that we initially did punt when we were designing node repairs, like how we exactly we react to unhealthy AZs. So yeah, it's definitely a question we need to answer.
Also, any other input things I should take a look at or, be sure to include or disinclude when writing the RFC? More community input. That was good.
Great. Anything else from anyone that's not listed here or?
I had one question if nobody else has anything.
Yeah.
I guess I'll
Go for
just
it.
go ahead. So yeah, I ran into something recently where like the core right now doesn't wait for custom resource definitions, right, for CRDs. And we in the past had to do that. I've seen some new logic or relatively new logic in the core, which kind of attempts to quote unquote fail open if the indexers are not able to be set up. But it seems like it wouldn't quite work because there are still controllers that depend on those indexers, and those controllers will be still broken. So basically, my question is, what's the thinking about whether the providers have to wait for CRDs or not? And because my feeling is that we probably need to, and maybe that logic does belong in the core. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think generally speaking, the CRDs being installed first is that is definitely a requirement for running Karpenter successfully, because you're right, the fail open state is only a semi fail open state. Basically, the intention of this was if you delete your CRDs, and let's say because node pools, for example, don't have any finalization logic, the CRD disappears immediately, but your node classes and node claims are still terminating. If you restart Karpenter, we want Karpenter to be able to run and still finalize those remaining resources. So those controllers, which aren't dependent on node pools, now can continue to run and continue to tear down those resources. But yeah, without crashing like right at the start when we're setting up indexers. Karpenter is definitely not in a fully operatable state without CRDs, though. Generally speaking, they should be installed first. And I think
Okay.
that's the expectation.
No, I mean that first of all, that explains, why this fail open logic was there. So that's very helpful. But now I'm wondering, how do you reconcile these two requirements, right? On one hand, it should wait for CRDs. On the other hand, you wanted to like proceed in the absence of CRDs on the start. Like what do you do usually?
Yeah, I mean, it's the assumption, at least for us, is that the CRDs are installed first. Like this is something that Helm orchestrates.
Okay. So you consider it an external concern that's basically is an assumption.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And then this logic would kick in case CRDs are deleted and Karpenter is restarted.
Yeah. Yeah, that pretty much the gist of it. It's not, you could make the argument that, oh, you deleted your CRDs, you should just reinstall them and then do the teardown properly that way. But this ensures that, okay, you deleted your CRDs because you're deleting your Karpenter deployment. Let's make sure we can actually tear down everything. like all of the managed resources. So in our case, like EC2 instances, launch templates, instance profiles, etc. Just a way to help us ensure that we don't leak any resources into customer accounts during teardown.
Got it. Okay, so just wanted to mention that like on our side, we have cases where CRDs would be deployed separately, not, in the same Helm chart deployment. So we need to introduce the logic to wait for CRDs in our provider. So it sounds like it would still be provider specific and it's not worth upstreaming, right? Or maybe we could upstream it and it could be a flag that you pass into the operator, or whether to wait for CRDs or not. I mean, that's another option.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth an RFC to understand the use case and such, but
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I had something, but it can wait if anyone else has anything else first.
Sounds like you're up.
All right. So basically, I just wanted to raise a question about the issue triage meeting. We have been doing issue triage meetings once every couple of weeks for each of the providers. So this ends up being once every week, or sorry, not each of the providers, for the AWS provider and for the core code. This was really useful in us while we were burning through a lot of our backlog. But at this point, I feel like each of these meetings is pretty quick because we don't have a ton of issues to go through and triage. I was wondering what everyone thought about maybe moving these meetings from bi-weekly to once a month. Any thoughts one way or the other there?
I haven't been at the last couple, but yeah, if we've burned through all the issues, it's great. It's great to be able to drop to once a month, right?
Yeah.
I mean, burn through in the sense of they've been triaged and they've been
Yes.
given additional labels, not necessarily that
Right. But
Yeah.
the point is keeping the backlog clean, as it were, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, no objection from me though.
Great. I wonder if we want to maybe post something about it in Karpenter Slack and Dev Slack, and we can get some additional comments there from people. And if there's no crazy complaints or writing about this, I think that we could move to monthly cadence.
It might be worthwhile to send out a email in the SIG Autoscaling mailing list as well.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
All right. That's all I had.
Maybe just a quick question. Any plans for the next core release? I think the two issues that, or maybe more that we talked through, they are not released yet, right? The one that merged on the main branch.
Yeah, so the taint syncing and the consolidation changes, those are being held up by the validation for emptiness, which I'm working through right now, trying to get a little bit of review and also making sure that the testing looks good. And pretty much following that, it would be checking EDEs and making releases.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I mean, optimistically in the next day, pessimistically and realistically, probably early next week. Okay. I think that's just about everything, and we can give everyone 20 minutes back unless there's anything else. Otherwise, we will see you in the next working group or triage meeting. Thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah.